What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Once again, my name is Jake. Well, I have been making my way through the entire Saw franchise. Today, I want to talk to you about Saw 4. It was directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who also directed Part 2 and 3. Came out in 2007. And this is the first installment so far that did not feature James Wan or Lee Winnell in the screenwriting role or have them contribute to the overall story in any way. So, here are my thoughts. Let's get into it. So despite Jigsaw's death, and in order to save the lives of two of his colleagues, Lieutenant Rigg is forced to take part in a new game, which promises to test him to his limit. In case you haven't been watching any of my Saw reviews up until this point, I'm kind of grading these movies a little bit on a curve. I'm not really going to factor in any of the plot holes or logical inconsistencies in these movies, just because I want to focus more on other things. And so I'm not really taking that stuff into account when I'm talking about these or giving them an overall grade. So with that being said, I do have a pretty good time with Saw 4 overall. There are some aspects of it that are, I would say, laughably bad, but even those things still kind of contribute to the overall entertainment aspect for me. And so even when this movie is laughably bad, I'm still having a good time with it. Other than that, though, I think the movie's got some pretty good traps and memorable kills, and I like what they do with the character of Jigsaw and just kind of exploring a little bit more of his backstory, and overall, I think this has a more compelling story than Part 3. So let's start off with the opening scene, which is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, the autopsy of Jigsaw. It is pretty fantastic. I just like what they do with the sort of muted, desaturated colors here so that when they cut him open, that blood red just really pops. I think the practical effects work here is really solid as that prop cadaver just looks really convincing. And just watching him get cut open, I just kind of had a smile on my face throughout the whole thing. It's just really cool to watch, and it's just done really well. And of course, how can you not love it when they cut open his stomach, and of course he's got a tape inside his stomach because the game is not over yet. And I just have a fun time with the scene. It's a great way to start the movie. And right after this, we cut to our first trap kill scene with two new characters, and we don't really understand the context of this until later on in the movie. And you get this kind of interesting setup where one of the characters can't see and the other one can't talk. And it's kind of a cool concept and idea, and I wish that they could have kind of executed it a little bit better. I feel like there's kind of a more creative or interesting way to execute that concept of having two guys sort of battling each other where one can't see and one can't talk. It's an okay kill overall. I just felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, that they could have done something a little better with it. Now, if you watch my review for Saw 3, one of my main complaints was that the opening 20 minutes just felt unnecessary and could have just been completely cut out and didn't really contribute at all to the overall story of Saw 3. And I still kind of agree with that. However, Saw 4 does a pretty good job of kind of connecting this back to Part 3 and giving a reason for the opening 20 minutes of Saw 3 to exist. It's at this point the police discover Carrie's body, who was killed in Part 3, and they determine that somebody else is helping Jigsaw and Amanda. And then this scene, we're also introduced to a new character, Agent Stram, who from here on out in this review, I'm going to be referring to as Agent Mean Mug, because this guy has a bone to pick with everybody. And it's also in this scene we get our first great line from this movie.
Who's he?
Lieutenant Rigg, our SWAT commander. What's his problem? Everyone around him keeps dying.
And it's just one of those great line deliveries where it's like, this is a line you would only ever see in a movie. And it's one of the aspects of this film that is just laughably bad. And there's a handful of them. But like I said, it keeps me entertained. So what ends up happening is the film more or less follows two main storylines as we follow Agent Mean Mug, who is trying to track down what we believe to be the new Jigsaw killer. And then we're also following Detective Rigg, as it is his job. He's more or less playing the new game where he has to save Detective Hoffman and Detective Matthews, who is Donnie Wahlberg from part 2 and part 3. And so it more or less cuts back and forth between those two stories. Now, the scenes with Agent Mean Mug are a little rough, and I don't think the blame should necessarily be put on his performance, but more just in his character, and mainly just the dialogue is just sometimes laughably bad. We get some of the most just like generic, stereotypical sort of police crime scene jargon that we've heard on, crime scene investigation type TV shows.
Obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting, conspirator to murder. Talk to me! 15 minutes more people are gonna die, Jill.
And I just can't help but laugh a few of the times. He finds one of the dead bodies of the woman who gets scalped in Riggs's apartment, and he looks down at her all serious and is like, "It's begun." It's like, yeah, you think? And there's just so many cheesy lines. Now, I can't help but talk about the transitions in this movie, because the transitions from scene to scene are absolutely outrageous. And I mean, I guess if you're going to go with something like what they do in Saw 4, this is the kind of movie to go with it. And I will say, though, too, I was reading up a little bit of trivia where none of the transitions are actually done in post-production. It was all done in camera by the way that they built the set. And so I think there is a little bit of credit to be due there. Just the fact that they're able to do it in camera and make it look as good as it does. They are completely ridiculous, but I think for this type of movie, you can kind of get away with it. And so in the end, it's cool. They work. Where I think the movie starts to pick up and get a little bit better is when Agent Mean Mug finds Jill, who we briefly see in a couple little flashbacks in Saw 3, and we find out that Jill was the girlfriend of John Kramer, or Jigsaw. And so this film also sets up some flashback scenes where we see Jill and John Jigsaw's relationship, and actually kind of like what they do here. I think it's pretty interesting, and they actually kind of humanize Jigsaw a little bit by giving you some of his background and show you some of the stuff that he's been through. In a way, he's a bit of a victim and has gone through some trauma and horrible experiences, and so you kind of can sympathize with him and understand, and I actually kind of like this, and typically I wouldn't. But I think that's what makes Jigsaw human. The movie's never really shied away at portraying Jigsaw as just a human being. A lot of times when you have slasher killers or serial killers in movies, they're almost like portrayed as this supernatural force. And so I think kind of the human aspect comes across, and I think it actually works pretty well. And so you get to see some of Jigsaw's backstory and what happens to him and how him and Jill ended up losing a baby. And then obviously he gets diagnosed with cancer and everything. And so I just kind of like this aspect of the movie. Tobin Bell, I think, his character is obviously the best character. He's the best performance. So anytime we get to see him on screen, it works for me, and I like it quite a bit. Now, in regards to Detective Riggs' side of the story, he's got to go through, play his game, where he is actually involved in the traps of these other people. And he's there either putting them in the traps or helping them out of the traps. And so I kind of like how they use that a little bit. He's got like 3 main sort of traps that he goes through, people that he deals with who are trapped. The one of the fat guy, the abuser in the hotel, I think is the best one, and certainly the most disturbing and bloody one. So that one is one of the highlight kills for me in this movie. Another trap scene that I really like is we get a flashback and see Jigsaw's first kill, where he captures the guy who basically killed the unborn baby of Jill. And I just like the simplicity of this. He's got him locked up and he's got to push his face through these knives, and just the simplicity and the bloodiness of it, I really like. It's a good kill. This and the abuser kill, I think, are the 2 best ones in the movie. Eventually, everything kind of converges and culminates where Detective Riggs shows up at the warehouse and Agent Mean Mug shows up at the warehouse where Matthews and Hoffman are. And the whole thing is that obviously this is Riggs' game, and he is obsessed with having to save people. He can't just let it go and stand back and take a break. And so Jigsaw sort of plays into that, right? And so he ends up busting through the door, and then we get just a great scene where, unfortunately, Detective Matthews dies, but his head gets smashed and explodes in these two big old ice blocks. Then we see Agent Mean Mug entering into the building, only to find out that this entire thing has been taking place simultaneously with the events of Saw 3. And he ends up finding Jeff in the room where Jigsaw was just killed and Lynn's head exploded. And he ends up getting trapped in that room because the big reveal is that Detective Hoffman is now the new Jigsaw, and he's the third party really sort of helping what was Jigsaw and Amanda, who are now both dead. And so what the movie does, the kind of the big reveal there is it's just kind of jacks with the timeline again, where you get the opening scene of Jigsaw's autopsy, and you think the rest of the events happen after that, but they actually happen before that, and that would be really chronologically the end of the movie. And so that's kind of the big twist right there. Overall, it's a decent twist. I mean, it's definitely surprising and unexpected, but it doesn't really have any sort of significant weight to it, really. The idea of Hoffman being sort of the new Jigsaw killer is, I don't love it, but, you know, it's fine. They got to find a way to continue these movies, right? So, anyway, the ending is decent. But overall, I still do have a pretty good time with this movie. There are some good kills and traps. I do like getting into a little bit of Jigsaw's backstory. And the opening scene is, I think, pretty fantastic. And like I said, there is even a laughably bad aspect of this movie where some of the dialogue is just atrociously awful, but it cracks me up, and so it's still kind of entertaining. So, with that being said, I think for a grade for Saw 4, I'm going to be at probably like a 6 out of 10. So have a pretty fun time with it overall. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below, though. Let me know what you like about this movie. If you love it, hate it, what's your favorite trap, all that stuff. Let me know down below. So once again, thank you so much for watching. If you like content like this, that is what I do on The Haunted Beard. It is all horror and thriller movie content coming at you. So hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.